Today's episode is brought to you by the Consultancy Growth Network. As you'll know, I'm a big believer in learning from people who've achieved the things that you want to. It's why I run this podcast, to share the stories of consulting leaders and how they've got to where they are today. So when I started talking to Mark Jansen and the team at Consultancy Growth Network, it was clear there was an obvious fit between climate consulting and their mission and what they are building with their network. But you're probably asking, what is the Consultancy Growth Network? The Consultancy Growth Network is the leading community of boutique consulting leaders. It brings together seasoned consulting growth experts who successfully scaled their own boutiques, with rapidly growing consulting founders looking to emulate their success. Now, you might be thinking, who are these growth experts? What do they actually know about consulting? And this is one of the most exciting things that personally I find about the network. The team at the Consultancy Growth Network have searched far and wide for some of the best boutique consulting leaders to help their members on their journeys, some of which I have previously interviewed for this podcast, such as Don Morehouse and Augusto Negrillo. But it's not just the insights from these people that you will benefit from. By joining, you get access to their jam-packed calendar of regular in-person and online events, their comprehensive growth hub of resources, and their active Slack community. Through all of these channels, you can learn, solve challenges, and achieve the goals you want for your firm. And now, if that wasn't enough reason to sign up, the Consultancy Growth Network is giving all listeners to this podcast a special sign-up offer. If you join for 12 months, you join for that next year, you will get your 13th month for free, giving you that extra month to continue to build on everything you're learning and continue to benefit from the network. To sign up, just visit consultancygrowthnetwork.com or contact their partnerships director, Luke at consultancygrowthnetwork.com. And when you're talking about joining, mention Create Engage or Climbing Consulting, and you will get that special sign-up offer. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If there is one thing I've learned from this podcast, it's that there's no set route to success. And my guest today is a case in point. Alan Frost started his career in accountancy and is now a partner leading the Forvis Mazars consulting practice. In this interview, we discuss Alan's career journey and delve into the strategies he used to go from accounting into transactions and then make the jump into consulting, but not just into consulting, to owning, turning around, and creating a thriving consulting business. We talk about a whole raft of topics in this one, including why Alan's background as a chartered accountant actually gave him an advantage when it came to coming into consulting. We talk about how the pandemic helped his team to strengthen their bonds and give them a deeper team spirit that still thrives today. And we explore what he thinks of the conventional wisdom that you can't grow a consulting practice with junior team members. And we talk about how Alan has made that work. This episode has so much in it, and Alan shared so many fantastic pearls of wisdom, ideas, thoughts, and just different pieces of advice that will help you, whether you are early in your consulting career or you are leading a business like Alan is today. So with the intro done, all that's left to say is please enjoy today's conversation with Alan Frost. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me to your office. And this is an amazing setup. I rarely get to be in podcast studios at clients' offices, so I'm very excited to speak to you. I'm very excited to be here as well. For our listeners and to help them just place you, it'd be great if you could share an overview of who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Nick. It's great to have you in the Forvis Mazars office today. This is also my first visit to this media room, so we're
learning together.
Exactly. I'm as impressed as you are. So no, my name's Alan Frost. I'm a partner here at Forvis Mazars in our London office. I actually joined what was just Mazars back in 2007, straight from university, into the audit department. Qualified as a chartered accountant, which was always, I wouldn't say a dream of mine, but certainly an interest of mine, let's say, when I was growing up. After 10 or 12 years in that team, maybe 10 years, I think it was, I got the opportunity to move into a new team that we were investing in and developing called Transaction Services, part of the M&A department. And that was great. And then for the last 6-7 years, I've led one of the consulting teams, which is now called Management Consulting, a team of around 40 consultants, all based in the UK, working on a variety of projects around business transformation, project, program, and change management.
Fantastic. I think a great overview, Alan, and really looking forward to diving into all of that today. I'm curious, just because you mentioned it, that audit was something you'd wanted to get into from a young age. Where did that come from before we go into consulting?
Being an accountant, I think, was something that I'd thought about at a young age. And maybe it was something that my mum had always said to me, you'd be a great accountant because you're good at maths. And there's so much more to it than being good at maths. But I do think having confidence in a core skill set, that you can then translate into your first full-time paid job is quite key. And I did come into the audit world, not really understanding what audit was, but certainly having an interest in finance, in accounting and problem solving, which I think when I look back, audit was a lot more problem solving than I probably anticipated when I joined Mazars in September 2007.
Well, I imagine a really good skill that's helped you in your consulting career as well. And I'd love to talk about that move into consulting, because you mentioned you'd been in audit for 10 years. That's quite a long time. You've built a career there. And making that jump into consulting, well, I won't assume, you tell me, the skills, I assume there's some differences, some similarities. But to start with, how did that opportunity come about? And I guess what made you say, yes, I want to leave audit and take the leap of faith into consulting?
Well, firstly, I think the accounting qualification, the ACA qualification that I've got, is a fantastic grounding for the rest of your career in whatever direction you go in. And if you look at some of the chief executives, the CFOs, but even COOs of large FTSE 100 and other international businesses, many of them will have the accountancy qualification. So I think that shouldn't be underestimated as a great bedrock and foundation to build upon. I was starting to get frustrated with the monotony, I suppose, of some of the audit work I was doing. I felt I was working on similar clients every single year. Maybe they weren't seeing the value that I felt I was delivering to them. So the opportunity to move into the transaction services team arose purely probably through luck of just building a relationship with the new partner that came in to build that team. And what was really interesting, Nick, was that the first transaction services project, a due diligence that I worked on, was actually with a client that I knew from my audit days. And the difference in how that CFO saw me, engaged with me, reacted to me, responded, was quite vast. Actually, it was night and day in many respects. When I rang, he answered the phone and wanted to talk and provided information in a way that maybe when I was the audit manager hadn't quite been as forthcoming. Nevertheless, what the few years in transaction services taught me was that the day after the deal, yesterday's news a little bit, and there's an argument that you're not quite as needed by the client, and you move on. And so I was sort of missing from my audit days that client relationship piece. So when I was asked if I'd be interested in moving into effectively a finance consulting team, which already existed within this business, but was only relatively small, I jumped at that idea. And the reason I was so enthused by it was that I thought I've now got the opportunity to help and work with all of our clients in the business 52 weeks of the year in a way that I didn't when I was in transaction services, because there would have to be an event that they're working towards, an acquisition or a refinance or something. And I'd be held in a different regard to maybe how I was when I was in the audit team. And I'm really pleased to say, as we sit here now in 2024, my thoughts were correct. And I'm not saying that we work with every single client that we work with for 52 weeks of the year, but we certainly have the opportunity to work in more of a partnering role with them.
Yeah, I love that frame, Alan. And to your point, the opportunity it presents, because consulting challenges can be so vast and so different. Actually, you get that opportunity, like you say. I love that combination of the audit relationship with the transaction services challenge. And to that move into that finance consulting team, what were those things that, particularly for our listeners who may have come from an audit background, were the skills where you thought, wow, I need to learn these quickly? What were some of those things that actually, obviously the ACA had helped you in some respects, but what were some of those things that, looking back, or now you train more junior colleagues, you think I really had to pick those up quickly?
When you're in the audit or the transaction services team, that the end goal is really well defined. You know that you're trying to get to a set of financial statements that offer a true and fair review of that company's performance and position. On the TS side, you want to get to, hopefully a project completion and for the deal to be successful. In consulting, lots of clients are coming to us, or colleagues are coming to us saying, we have a problem, but we don't actually know what the solution is. We're not 100% convinced we know really what the problem is. And so being able to be in a position whereby you can help navigate what the real problem is, because a lot of the time the client comes with a problem that isn't the problem, or it is a problem, but there's something further which is causing it to be the issue, and then designing what that solution could look like. And that was a very, very different position to be in. And I remember reading RFPs and invitations to tender for pieces of work thinking, but I don't know what the solution is yet. And now making me realize, well, that's part of the aim, to try and actually design what that solution could be. Or equally thinking, I don't think this is the issue that the client thinks they've got that they want to solve is actually the issue. And again, trying to convince and work with a client to explain, you might have a challenge there, but it's because there are 3 or 4 things further down the line that are causing that to be the issue.
It's a great point. And it's an interesting question around how you adapted to that. And I don't know if that's to your point of your chats with your mum about your math skills, whether that adaptability was one of your other skill sets, because I've only worked on the consulting side. I've never worked in audit. But to your point, if you're going from a world which is fairly structured for 10 years to transaction services, which I suspect is also reasonably structured, differences, but you're buying something or selling it, there's a defined beginning, middle, and end. Actually moving into a world where, to your point, the problems can be completely undefined or wrongly defined. Was that just a natural skill of yours, or was that, to your point, something you had to learn to be able to start to pull out those challenges from those RFPs?
No, it wasn't something that I anticipated, or it is something I had to learn over time. And when I look back at some of the initial projects that I worked upon and the proposals I wrote and we were successful on, the ones that we were successful on, and then engagements that we delivered, I look back and I question, would I approach it in the same way today? Hindsight's a great thing, but no, I wouldn't. I would have spent more time trying to convince the client that the question they posed to us isn't the right question, or the solution they want us to get at to is not the right solution. And the audit profession in particular, requires you to be challenging and not just accept what the client says as gospel, but really delve down to the root cause, I suppose, of that and be confident upon the answer and the evidence that you've got. And that was probably something that I, through a lack of confidence, didn't take in to my early consulting days. That, 5 whys and keep asking and asking and asking and asking until you get to the true conclusion. I took too much of what the client said at face value and then went and delivered effectively what they asked me to deliver. I think our team and myself have matured a huge amount over the last 5, 6, 7 years, in that we don't just take that approach anymore. We back ourselves to say, we've seen this as an issue before with other clients. This isn't the issue, or it is the issue, but there is another solution to what you think. Or we need to look in a completely different area at what is really driving this problem for you. It's not necessarily what you think. And that confidence, I think, really, maybe I'm being hard on myself. Maybe you couldn't have had that confidence or that approach to begin with. You have to almost go through a bit of a rite of passage of maturing and recognizing that. But I'm confident that that's what we instill into our team now in a way that maybe we didn't previously.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And like you say, some of that confidence can only be learnt by doing, can't it? And it sounds like where you are now, those are the questions you're asking that the clients want to hear, that are helping you to build the successful business you have. And because I'd love to come on to that team piece and the team you've built, maybe just to set the scene, kind of when you joined the consulting team, when you joined that finance consulting team, where was the business unit? In terms of, you mentioned you've got 40 people now. Where did you start? What was that?
We had about 12 people, and those individuals had very different skill sets. And actually part of the challenge was seeing, could we join them up into a harmonious jigsaw where everyone fitted in nicely and recognized where they were? Unfortunately, we couldn't. And the reality was, we went through a period of the first 12 or 18 months of me being in that team with a lot of attrition, probably very little of it being regretted attrition. And that was at both senior and junior manager levels. I think when I look back, I moved into a team that had an upside down pyramid as the org chart. So it was a very top heavy team. And if I compare that to today, we're not, it's quite the opposite. And that's probably testament to the fact that I joined Mazars at 21. I was relatively green, probably very green, and the firm have really helped me grow as both an individual, but also as a professional. And I think that there is space for consulting in that, even though, clients want often experience and people who've done the exact same problem elsewhere. I think actually the world is moving so fast these days. the team outside this media room, challenged me in a way that, I could never have imagined being challenged 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or never imagined challenging more senior people than me, which I find so refreshing and so important. There are no airs and graces about, I'm the most senior person, this is the way we're going to do it. It's very much, this is the scenario. How are we going to do it as a group? Everybody's ideas are as valued as each other's. My role is to make sure that the best ones get heard and that the best ones are the ones that we then focus on and progress.
I love it, and I'm going to avoid carbon dating both of us by starting to talk about young people, but I have exactly the same in my team, and I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the fact we're in a media room says things have changed since you and I started our careers, and I really want to dig into that cultural piece you mentioned and how you've cultivated that, because it sounds very deliberate. I think first, just because you shared it, and Alan, I like in this podcast to explore things and dispel myths, because obviously Forvis Mazars, you're quite a big firm, and there might be some listeners to this thinking, well, it's you have the luxury of changing a team when you've got a big team around you. Equally, I'm very aware, I'm sure you had targets, you had personal career goals, you had team goals, and I just love to talk about that. You mentioned that 12 to 18 month period, if you're happy to, because how you turn around a team, I think, is fascinating. And I'd love to know how you went about almost diagnosing those challenges, because I think that diagnosis obviously led to the success you've had, but not everyone would have done what you did. So how did you do that?
It's a really good question, Nick. And, you've just touched upon a couple of things there. Even today, even with our growth, we are still a small team in a large organization. And at times I look at it and think we're a bit of a tech startup or a consultancy startup in a large organization. And that gives you both pros and cons. The pros are obviously that, we've got a fantastic client base that we can hopefully delve into, etc. We've got a very varied skill set around the organization. It's a great place to work, etc. The slight negative to it is that we're also compared to other business units around the country and around the company that are much more established, work in a very different area of business, for instance, audit or, more recurring business nature types. And it's impossible to not be compared against them. That's the nature of things. So I think when I look back to those first 12 or 18 months that you talk about in this team, I still brought a headspace and a desire to have this stable, profit-making, team. And it was unrealistic. It was never going to happen. Now, fortunately, I think people much more senior than me that brought me into the team recognize that. And I will forever be grateful for the time that Mazars gave me to and others to try and help to turn it around, to stem the losses, to rebuild. I don't think we'd have necessarily got the time that the firm gave us if we were elsewhere. I think that I feel confident. I mean, maybe I'm not in a position to say that, given that I've worked at Mazars since I was 21, but that's how I feel, that we maybe wouldn't have been gifted that patience that the executive and others had in us or gave us. I'm sure there was difficult meetings that they had and said, what do we do? Do we call it a day? And that faith that they maybe played in me has been, I've hopefully repaid back by helping it grow to where it is today. But yeah, those first 12, 18 months were really, really tough. And I certainly chased the wrong things in order to justify our existence, to effectively, pay the wage bill, albeit it's a small wage bill in a large organisation. There's probably a sense of personal pride that you want the team to feel valued. You want the team to recognise the value of their expertise and what we're delivering for clients. There wasn't quite the quantity of work that we needed to make it as grow and as profitable and as self-sufficient as we wanted to. And so I think I look back, I did chase things just to pay the bills, and I really wish I hadn't when I look back, but it was probably the right thing to do. But my suggestion, if you can, would be that others try and stay truer to what they're trying to achieve, because I think although the growth has been fantastic in this department over the last few years, I think if we had have been more niche and doubled down in certain areas rather than being as broad as maybe we've been, I think our growth could have been even more exponential than it already has. And that sounds very greedy, I think, when I say that, given the growth that we've experienced as a department. but it's something I feel.
Well, I think it's the blessing and curse of running a consulting business is we're always unsatisfied with what we've achieved, and you probably wouldn't have achieved what you had you been satisfied, Alan. So it's the curse that you have to bear. If you are enjoying this episode so far, I have one small ask. I would massively appreciate if you could open your phone right now, hit share, and send this to someone in your network, one of your friends, one of your colleagues, one of your clients who you think would benefit from this interview. This podcast only runs because of you and because of the value you get from it. And it would mean so much to me to broaden that reach so we can help more consultants to climb in consulting. So please hit that share, send it to a friend, and I'm really excited to hear what they think too. I think it's a really interesting point to dig out some of those learnings. And to your point, it sounds like there was an inflection. I don't want to say point. I suspect it wasn't like a Hollywood film where one day, you suddenly had everything answered. But you mentioned there, you teased a few bits around getting back to profitability. Obviously, you touched on talent, you touched on niche. And I'm thinking particularly, we were talking about the Consultancy Growth Network ahead of this, the bench press tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Everyone in our industry is talking about it's a challenging time in the cycle, and firms are having to work hard to sustain what they're doing. And I'd love for our listeners, to that point, almost what were those things that when you started to put in place, you started to see that growth? It sounds like there was that diagnosing and learning phase for that 12 to 18 months. I'd love to hear what, in hindsight, or for our listeners, those building blocks of the success were.
When I look back, there was actually one day that did turn it on its head, like a bit of a Hollywood
paint the picture.
Hollywood moment, and I remember it so clearly. It was a Monday evening, and we probably can all remember the same day, or certainly a similar time of our lives, where the email came through that said, "Don't return to the offices tomorrow because this pandemic is pretty real. We want you to work from home indefinitely." And what that meant was that I and some others were able to spend so much more time with our teams, and to an extent with our clients, that maybe we hadn't previously. Now, I think personally, I lived on my own at the time, so maybe it was my craving of, physical contact, well, not physical contact, but connecting with individuals that caused me to be on Teams for 10 hours back to back. And I've not actually got out of that terrible ritual, actually, even today, 4 years later. But that was a real changing point for us. We had started to turn a corner before the pandemic hit, but I say that the pandemic for my team was a little bit of a blessing. And I say that with the greatest respect to people that have been through difficult things in the pandemic. I'm talking about purely for my team in this business. Those events caused a change in the way in which we worked together as a group, the way in which I felt as though we could upskill people in a safe environment. People were able to have those conversations with me in particular that maybe they wouldn't have felt as comfortable having in the office, saying, "Would you mind coming into a meeting room to talk to me, Alan?" So sharing screens, simple things made a huge difference. Coupled with the fact that the team at the start of the pandemic, which was about 14 or 15 strong, the team were now able to work with clients all over the country and, in fact, internationally, in a way that we hadn't been previously. And I remember one day very early on in the pandemic whereby we did a workshop in the morning with a client in Scotland, in Edinburgh, which was really well received. It was a brilliant piece. And then we finished for about half an hour, and then we did a workshop with a client in Devon. And I thought this was never possible 6 weeks ago. And now this is how we're operating. And actually the delivery of those workshops, I think, was probably better to an extent, online than it would have been in person at that time. Now we want to get more out and be in person because I think we're more confident in that environment. But those were the couple of things that really changed at that time of the pandemic.
Well, I think some great examples, Alan, and some things that in a way feel counterintuitive. And to your point, one version is exactly how you experienced it. The fact you could be on your laptop for 10 hours, but you could check in with all your team. I think there's an interesting thing to draw out there of, for some people, if they didn't do that, they felt isolated and disconnected. Your point, actually, you saw it and used it as a great positive to connect deeply with people privately, whereas in an office is hard. Similarly, your point of you could now expand geographically. And I suspect you mentioned earlier around niching. So there's a broaden, but keep it really focused. And I guess, how did those pieces of the puzzle come in? Because there's a real sort of people-centric piece of what you're describing there. And I might be coming back to the niche bit later. I might not introduce it yet, but you tell me. That kind of, that was your moment. At the same time, there was the potential for that to be, the failing of the business, because you could try and get work everywhere and you could not speak to your team. Why did you go the way you did? Is that, just how you are as a person? Was there something that, had hit you with the team? I'd love to dig into that why.
It wasn't a conscious decision. So I just did what I felt was right. I mean, I remember thinking these guys are at home, small team. First thing I did was get online to try and find some computer screens for them, because I thought I don't want them hunched over a laptop all day. It's not good for them. It's not good for their health. I don't think from a productivity perspective it's great either. So there was a self-interest threat, in there as well. And some listeners may remember how difficult it was to get on Argos or Amazon to try and get a screen. I drove an awful long way one night to pick up 2 screens from an Argos that was granted, you were allowed to drive at this point, just to be clear. I wasn't breaking any rules, but I couldn't get any in the vicinity of where I was. So I drove an awful long way, picked them up, and drove to 2 of my colleagues' houses and dropped them off. Now, I was doing that as much for them as I probably was for me when I look back, but I felt it was the right thing to do. I was going to make a difference to them. I was going to help them. And maybe some of those pieces that we implemented a morning call from 9 till 9:30 every day for 5 days. And we actually kept that up for 2 years of doing that call every single morning. Probably 40% of the time, we didn't really talk about work. We just talked about what was going on in our lives, the news, the weather, anything and everything. But that bonding, I didn't appreciate at the time how important that was for everybody, not from a mental health perspective of the pandemic and keeping us all sane in that sense, but actually building us as a team and really being able to understand one another. And as a result, I remember 2 guys in completely individual incidents, both ringing me up at different times of the pandemic, 2 of our highest performers in the team for sure, ringing me up saying, can we have a chat on Teams, switching off their camera so I couldn't see them, which wasn't something we tended to do. We were very visible to one another, and they broke down in tears. Now, I don't think they would have done that in an office, and I'm not sure they would have done that actually if we'd have built the trust in the team that we had. We didn't get everything right, don't get me wrong, but we were obviously doing things right to build that safety, which I think was so important at the time of the pandemic. Actually, that psychological safety in work, gave people something.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really powerful story, and to your point on that psychological safety and people feeling comfortable to do that, because whether or not it's in an office, you're still their boss in sort of air quotes, and there is also, and I've worked in larger but quite small organizations, there's still that questions and pressure of, what will so-and-so think? What's the politics involved? And there's a lot wrapped up in that. So that psychological safety you built in that period sounds really powerful. And because you touched on the culture has continued to go in the direction you want. How have you sustained that psychological safety, that kind of feeling? To your point, you mentioned you no longer do the call, but how have you continued to cultivate that in the team today where we're now back in an office?
Training is really important to us, and continuous improvement. We help our clients around continuous improvement, so we need to be continuously improving as a team. Next week, for instance, we're going away for 3 days as a group to an offsite, and we'll have a 3-day training event that we do it twice a year, in the first week of January and then in the summer as well. That is obviously important from a technical and softer skills training perspective, but it's as much about a team building and piece as well. There'll be events in the morning before breakfast that people put on, whether it be a small team run, some yoga, some other events to think about. There'll be things that we do of an evening, rounders games, fancy dress, murder mystery, that type of thing. These are events that not only do we teach and build a lot of technical skills, but we also build that friendship, which I think is really important. And when I say that friendship, I'm not necessarily saying that to go drinking or to go partying or whatever, socializing at weekends outside of work. Friendship I can open up and say, I'm struggling with what I do here. Have you got any ideas on how I can address this challenge with this client? Or, technically, how do I build this, find this, whatever it could be? And that's a huge probably very difficult to quantify benefit that comes out of this. And I talked about the upside down pyramid that I moved into. That was very different from the cohort that I joined Mazars in 2007, which was a huge group of, say huge, about 60 people, I think, when I look back, and now it's about 400 that join us every September, but certainly 300, I think. I wanted that cohort of people to join us. So we implemented something that from every September we would start to bring in graduates straight into a consultancy team. And there are people both in this business and other businesses that said to me, and a very famous quote, "You'll win nothing with kids." You can't bring people of that age and of that experience into a consultancy practice. Well, we haven't got it right every time, but there's some of those graduates that we brought in their first employment who are now managers, assistant managers, senior consultants in the team. And I know for a fact that out there are future directors, partners, C-suite individuals, and future leaders, effectively, that we've hired into this team that will either stay with Forvis Mazars or move on to other things in their careers and be incredibly successful as a result of some of the programs, the learnings, the teachings, trainings, and camaraderie that we've built in this team.
I think the approach you follow sounds amazing. And to your point, that connection, more than just professional, actually getting to know each other. And I think you're right. You can do that within work hours or extended work hours. It's not suddenly you have to spend your Saturdays together. I love the quote, and I won't ask you where it came from, but it's the sort of thing I feel must be on a wall somewhere, that you'll win nothing with kids.
Well, it's a football quote, isn't it?
I'm afraid I'm more of a rugby man.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if that was someone in the industry had told you that, but I did not know the football reference. I do now. Who is that attributed to? I don't know.
Well, Alan Hansen, who unfortunately at the moment is very unwell in hospital, so heart goes out to him and his family. Alan Hansen said it on Match of the Day, very famously, when Manchester United were playing a game, and he said, "You'll win nothing." Sir Alex Ferguson, "You'll win nothing with kids." And then, lo and behold, later that season, they didn't just win the Premier League, they also won the FA Cup, I believe, as well. So it's then gone down in folklore even 30 years later. But yeah, very, very funny.
Also, you had a great, by the sounds of it, there was a great example of where you can win things with kids. So I can see why you would have had that in your mind. I think it's interesting, though, back to that point, Alan, of when you took on the team, you're fighting to turn the sort of business around. You need to win work, all of the above. And it's an interesting conversation to have, because sort of common orthodoxy, if you like, for smaller consultancies, you mentioned when you were 12 people, it's like you say, upside down pyramid, stack it with experts because they know what they're doing, they're easier to sell, there's less oversight needed. You mentioned you very deliberately moved to the traditional pyramid, and to your point, you're taking in brand new grads. I guess, how have you made that structure work? What was it for you about the kind of the reverse pyramid that wasn't working? And for anyone listening who's like, I would never bring a grad in, kind of how have you made that other way work? So you can, to your point, you're in pitches and you are winning stuff with inverted commas kids.
We started small. We brought in 2 guys. One of them still here. One of them left us after 3 years, but came back after 9 months out of the business and rejoined us. And I think there's an element of luck in anything, isn't there? And the 2 individuals that we brought in really set the tone for everybody that's followed them over the next 5 years of intake. And it's grown and grown. We'll take in 5. We took in 5 last year. We'll take in 5 this September as well. So we're not talking about tens and tens of people. And we don't have a high attrition rate.
It's still quite
2 to 5, yeah.
My maths is not as strong as yours will be, but that's an 11%. You're bringing in 11% of your workforce each year as graduates if you're 40 people now.
Yeah. I mean, the team has grown from 12 to 40 in 5 years. So yeah, it's probably reflective, isn't it, of what we need. But they've worked together each year. From the 2 that we brought in 2019 all the way through to the 5 that we brought in 2023, and we will do in 2024. They've always worked as a group to upskill those below and to hand off where they were. So I feel as though the bar has increased every 12 months in terms of how those graduates are finishing their first year as a result of the years above of people that they've got above them to learn from. And when I look at them, they really are a united group. Who would do anything for one another. And sometimes it's only at the end of a project or even months later that you find out that people that you perhaps didn't even know were contributing to a project were contributing, or that conversations have been had outside of just water cooler conversations effectively, and the impact that they'd each had on one another, how they'd helped each other out in times of need or shared ideas and thoughts with one another. And that's what, I mean, it sounds corny, but that is one of the proudest things I take when I look out at the team, is to think how well they help and support one another. We really are a team that will succeed together or not fail together, but, maybe underperform at times together. We're in it as one.
And to your point of the growth, because I think, it's really great to hear that that's where the team is. And like you say, that kind of bringing together those grad classes. I think my grad intake was about 20 people. And so I know exactly what you're talking about, that kind of camaraderie. Obviously, and this doesn't sound like it is with yourselves, but as a business grows, when there were 12 people, you could metaphorically kind of touch everyone in the room. You could speak to everyone. As there's 40, that span of control just scales. And there is always the risk that, you mentioned the bar is raised every year. There's always the risk that that bar dilutes, because if everything originally starts from you and the top people, that's easy if there's 3 layers. When there's 7 layers, how you get it down, the layers gets harder. And I'd love to understand if there is anything you and the team have put in place to ensure that doesn't happen. It would be very easy potentially for grads to get lost. How have you ensured that, to your point, the best is being handed off, as you said, and that bar is continually being raised?
Well, I think because we've never done a big bang of bringing in 20 people on one day or something like that. But like I said, we've had low attrition. Therefore, we've been able to retain knowledge, ways of working within the team, which has helped. So, I'm thinking about the people who are now managers and assistant managers that were brought in as business analysts. They see that responsibility of those underneath them as, they're the ones that are coaching them in the way that maybe they were coached when they were brought in. That said, I still think there's an element of that span of control that hasn't been diluted to the extent that it should have been. I still think maybe I do like to have more hands on things than maybe I should for a team of this size. And that's a learning for me as we go to our next phase of growth, to say you're going to have to relinquish a few things and step away. And
well, you've got time to do this podcast, so you can't have everyone reporting into you.
No.
Well, that's my assumption at least.
That is true.
And turning, I guess, to the other side of that equation, because it sounds like you've got the cultural side really right and you've built the team well. Obviously, one side of the consulting equation is bringing in talent. The other side is selling that talent. And maybe we start with the junior talent piece and then broaden it out, because to that quote of, you'll win nothing with kids, you're going in, you're, a relatively new consulting brand, you've got a young team. How did you in those early days, and how have you honed since that approach to BD to win? Because again, someone listening might be thinking, well, I've got 5 Allens who are all 10 years experience. Of course, we'll be Alan and his, band of graduates. You clearly made the model work. So how did you approach the BD side to get those people busy?
I think a lot of professional services firms write in their proposals that we're a senior-led team. And, and the consultancy has long been tarred with this idea that, a partner will go in and sell the project and then you'll never see him or her again until, the closing meeting and things like that. I was very aware of that when I came into this team, and I was determined for that not to be the case. There are certain projects, undoubtedly, that myself and other senior people are less hands-on within. But when we say that we're senior-led, we're senior-led. And for me, that was why I dispelled that myth of, you can't bring junior people into a team. Quite the opposite. I think we have a responsibility as leaders to bring junior people in the team, but not necessarily to throw them into the deep end and say, good luck swimming, but to take them into the shallow end and say, watch how I do it, learn from me, not in a patronizing way that maybe just sounded then, but, come on this, I'm going to show you how I do it. The best thing for me is that when I'm saying, I'm going to show you how I do it, usually the junior members of my team are saying, Alan, there's probably a better way to do it. And it looks like this. And I'm saying, yeah, well, I was going to get to that.
That's the next class.
Exactly. So that's how we've done it. We haven't missold, I don't think, it to anybody. And we'll probably come onto it at some point. But trying now, particularly as we've matured, to deliver less, but of a much greater quality and not be quite the volume, keep people busy model is probably where we're trying to move to and have moved to an extent, quality over quantity.
Well, I'd love to pick up on that because, again, to your point of kind of dispelling consulting myths and, common cliches, because you're right, there is a bad reputation in our industry that Rainmaker comes and disappears. I guess the other, and I ask it as a question because I'm sure it is a myth, is, well, junior people can only do kind of turn the handle work. So, there's plenty of organizations where they do have hundreds of juniors and it is low grade work. Just because you teased it there, you're looking to move up the value chain. And I appreciate not all 40 of your team are just grads, but I'd love to know how you are and how you have approached repositioning yourselves, because that's not the easiest thing to do. If you were doing work that you felt was you could do greater in terms of quality, to your point, how have you made that shift? And how have you been successful at starting to climb that value chain?
Well, again, we've touched on it a couple of times, but if you think about coming into a senior-led team, the ethos of the team was much more, well, I'll take that and I'll just deliver that on my own. The way we tried to change it was to say, don't just deliver it on your own. Bring somebody along the journey with you. They may not be chargeable. You may not be able to sell them to the clients initially, but they'll learn from you. And I'm sure they will offer some value. Now, that took time to implement, as you can imagine. And there are certain projects where we still feel this is very senior-led. It might be, hugely high profile or riskier, for instance. But on the whole, that's the model we've tried to move to is, and I think my previous example is testament to that, of come and watch me and watch how I do it, but actually probably make me even better as a consultant because of your ideas and the way you do things. The last couple of weeks ago, we were having a team meeting, and two team members were presenting some of the work that they'd done for this client, and it was brilliant. It was really, really good. I got all of it. However, I knew for a fact that the two people we were going to be presenting to at the client would have been completely overwhelmed with what they produced. It was great, but it was too much. It was too intense, and it would have scared them. And I said that to my two colleagues. I said, we need to find a different way to present it to them. What I really meant was, we need a shorter PowerPoint deck. What I actually got the following week was a 2.5-minute video that brought our report to life in a way that I never even realized was possible.
Wow.
And, all those resources were available internally. I probably should have been more clued up on it myself as to we had that expertise or that ability to create things using AI and other technologically savvy methods. And we presented it to the clients in person. And obviously I'd seen this video a few times. I'd made suggestions around editing certain words and things like this, but it was mainly all their work. And so I purposely sat back in my chair and just watched the two members of the client, sort of watch their reaction. They did not take their eyes off this video for the full 2.5 minutes. They were captivated, and that set the scene for the rest of that closing meeting with that client, and delivered, a final deliverable that I don't think would have been achievable if we'd have just gone down the traditional route that maybe I've always been taught to take, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an example of the value. I think that maybe younger people effectively, but less experienced people who are, don't know the usual way of doing things, we're able to offer. There'll be listeners that think, that's not that revolutionary. Well, it is for the way in which we've been delivering our projects for the last 5 years that I've been in this team. So, and it was incredibly successful.
Well, no, I think it's a great example and touches on, obviously answers the kind of value question, because to your point, if the client expects a PowerPoint and actually you're doing a video, suddenly, well, that's something new, that's exciting. And there's something really interesting in that as, I guess, a proof point to the culture you were talking about as well, because it takes the psychological safety for your team to be willing to do that. If they had expected you to be like, what the heck is this? I asked for just 10 slap PowerPoints, not this, you wouldn't have got that creativity. And there's something really interesting in that benefit of psychological safety coming through there. If you are listening to this because you want to improve your consultancy or your practice area or just your career, then I want to give you something that will help you supercharge that on top of this, focused on marketing. If you go to our website, createengage.co.uk/insights, you can download our super detailed ROI-driven strategy framework ebook. In that, we go into detail on exactly what you need to do to build an effective marketing strategy, to build a strategy that will deliver you ROI and help you achieve your growth goals. So take that link, download it, and enjoy that after the end of this episode. How have you fostered in yourself that comfort? Because there's something as a leader in being able to trust your team enough to just do that. And not, you mentioned, like, we know we've got the client pitch coming up. You're super busy. Almost that, how you managed to quieten that part of your head that went, well, what if it all goes wrong and what do we do there?
Yeah, it's funny because I never at one point went away that weekend thinking, what are they going to come back with? I'm sure, I'm nervous about what we're going to present in 3 working days' time to this client. That wasn't a fear that came across me. And it's not just about those 2 individuals that were working on that specific project with me. I think I feel as though I would feel in that way for anybody in our team, which is obviously great. It is something we must talk about it all the time in terms of thinking outside the box, trying to be different. I very much feel at Forvis Mazars, we're not perhaps known in the industry as being a consultancy organisation. Therefore, I try not to negotiate against myself or get, batter myself down. But there are probably at times on certain projects easier appointments to make than Forvis Mazars. And I won't name some of the organisations, but I'm sure the listeners will have
all heard that you won't get fired for.
Well, exactly. I've given one cliche already. I don't want to give another one out. But there's an element of truth in that sentence, isn't there, that you just referred to, Nick? And so, therefore, we need to be creative. We need to think about how we differentiate ourselves. One of the ways I think in which we massively differentiate ourselves is our people. And, we won't just take the rainmaker to the pitch and then never see them again. We bring the whole team. This is who you are buying into. I need you to, Mr. or Mrs. Client, be as happy with everybody in this team rather than just who I think are maybe the best presenters, the prettiest faces to go and sell the work. This is everyone. And if you don't like us all, then you can't, I say like, because it's not just a likability test. If you don't trust and believe and have that confidence in us all, we might not be the right firm for you. I forget the size of the consultancy industry, but we don't need to cry over missing out on a single project. There is an awful lot of business out there for consultancy organizations to go after. Not every client will be right for us, and we won't be right for every client.
Yeah, well, and it comes back to Alan, and it's coming through really strongly, that confidence piece of, it's easy for us to sit here and say, to your point, there is lots of work in the industry. It's quite another when you are looking for work, or when you're turning a team around to build that confidence. And I think it's also acknowledging that doesn't leave you as a consulting leader. There's always, you are permanently on a 3-month cliff. And so actually having that confidence to say, well, this might not be right, that might not be right, to your point, obviously, has cultivated the culture. On the BD side, because it was something we touched on ahead of this conversation, and I think links quite nicely. You mentioned that in your journey as a team and growing the business, you've not shied away from taking on smaller projects. Again, to your point, I'll try and avoid any more cliches, but a lot of people will say, well, we won't get out of bed for less than this. You made the point that actually, not we'll go after anything, to like you said, but you're very open to some of the smaller projects. I guess why, and also how have you then made that a workable business model?
Good question. I think, again, going back to the audit and transaction services days, it instilled in me the importance of client relationships, and that particularly in audit, you weren't welcomed with open arms when you walked into a client's organization to do their annual audit. You had to work hard to get face time with people, build relationships, build rapport, and that's probably stood me and some colleagues in really good stead in this area of the business. And that's been important for us. And I've always had that confidence then that if senior people have those client relationship building skills, that will feed through all the way down through the rest of our team and the organization. Therefore, if we can get in and we can show something that, might only be tactical and small, but hugely impactful, then theoretically it could well open the doors, especially when you go back to that idea of, yes, we could solve this issue. I will, to prove to you that we can solve the issue, but there might be other problems elsewhere that are holding it back as the value of the solution. That's where the confidence comes from. And I would like to say that on the whole, I can't. There's always examples whereby you don't quite gel with certain individuals and clients, and I've got them as much as any of the junior members have probably got them. But there's the vast majority are saying we love the team, we love the work that you did, we enjoyed working with them, and that I think is really key to being invited back, to being, to clients opening up actually as well. And that's a skill that we've really tried to embed into the team to say, be comfortable with silence when you're talking to clients because they usually offer a bit more, but build that relationship in a way whereby when they've got a problem, they think, maybe I'll run this past Alan, or maybe I'll run this past the Forvis Mazars team to get their input on it, because no better way to become a trusted advisor and to grow a consultancy business than being referred to and thought of in that ethos.
Yeah, I really like that. And like you say, it's back to that point you were making right at the start of people don't always know their problem. And so if you're the one in their office having a chat, that unlocks the next problem. And that can often be more long-term, sort of more lucrative in terms of length of relationship and what you get in terms of work from it than, like you say, maybe I will only go for the, this 6-figure project or that 6-figure project. And that client centricity piece sounds like it's a really core part of your growth, part of what you've built, similar to the team side. And how have you approached and instilled that? Is it, like you say, your learnings from audit when no one wanted to let you in, and so you had to actually, charm and kind of learn and get to know people? Has it been something that you've cultivated in the team since? I'd just love to know how you've built that culture across the team, because it sounds like you have.
Deliver pure quality. Pure quality deliverables are the best business development tool that you can have. And if I go back and do the analysis on our performance as a team, say when we were half the size that we are today, I would be pretty confident that we're not working with double the amount of clients today than we were back then. We're working with a few more, don't get me wrong, but we're just working with them in a deeper manner and in different areas of their organization because they've seen the value that we've offered, and they've either brought to our attention of the challenges that they've got or introduced us to other people in their organization that have got similar challenges or other challenges, or, the brand value that we therefore offer has just become more well known. And that's really, really rewarding, I think is the right word, when I look at clients that I think we've brought on a small project, we've delivered that small project for them, but now look how embedded we are in their organization, the value that we deliver for them on a daily basis, and the way in which, if they've got a problem, they'll come to us and say, what do you think? How do you think we could resolve it? Could you help us? The more of that, the better.
Sometimes it's the basics, isn't it? Like you say, do good work and it will follow.
And that's something that I think is really important, particularly for some of our more junior members, because we've lost a couple of people after they've been promoted from, say, senior consultants into managerial grades, and they've felt that, okay, there's going to be a pound note target now for me to go and deliver on my head. I've got to start doing business development. And that scares me because, I just want to solve problems. I'm not a salesman. I'm not this, that. I'm really disappointed when we lose people or I was disappointed when we lost 2 individuals in particular for that belief, because they would have gone on and become even more successful in this organization. I know they would if they'd have stayed, because their quality of deliverable was their business development tool that they just didn't quite recognize that at the time. So whenever we do have instances whereby I'm saying, look, guys, we're doing more work with this client. We're growing. We're adding more value. You're enjoying it even more. And that's a big part of it, actually. When we're doing more with the clients, it's not just me sitting back thinking, oh, great, we've got more work coming in. We've got more fees. The team members are taking more from it as individuals. They're walking into those clients' offices with more confidence, with their shoulders pushed back and thinking, actually, this client believes in me. That we are adding value. We are making a difference. And I think that almost becomes that virtuous circle of the quality then improves further again and again and again and again. It sounds very simplistic in a media room like this, Nick, talking to you, but it's...
Well, I think to your point, it's the how you maintain that, which is the challenging part, isn't it? Because on its own, do great work, get people to buy more stuff is the business model, but how you maintain that and how you have maintained that is the fascinating thing. And it weaves through all the pieces you've talked about with that client centricity, with the culture that you're building as well, because it also, I infer from what you're saying, the team hold each other to account, because that's where it can be a risk if you grow and you don't maintain that culture. Quality dips as you go down, just as it dilutes from you. Whereas I think what you're saying is actually the team are so invested, everyone pushes each other up. To your point, your colleagues following you in the pool metaphor, and they're giving you different ways to do it. Like, that's what instills and makes that kind of flywheel work.
Yeah, it is. And it'll be interesting to see as we grow from 40 to 400, how much of that we're able to retain. And, naturally it'll bring other challenges along the way. But I think that hold to account, but also that desire to see others do well and succeed is so refreshing to see in this team in a way that I haven't seen maybe in other teams that I've worked in or in our clients to the same extent that I see here in this team. Genuinely take pride in seeing one another deliver quality, enjoy their work. We do an awful lot of feedbacks internally in the team of this was the project we did, this is how we approached it. We do it both after the projects, but we also do it during projects to get ideas and brainstorm thoughts from other people as well. And you can see when we're on a Teams call and our weekly chat, presenting to one another, you can see genuine, empathy and warmth towards one another about how great the deliverables look, the feedback from the clients, the enjoyment people took from you can't fake that sort of stuff. It's good to see.
Yeah, definitely. And a slightly different topic on the BD side, because you mentioned earlier, one of the benefits for you being part of Forvis Mazars as a consulting business, if you like, is you've got all of these other business is within the business, and you've got your audit colleagues, your transaction colleagues, and it's something because we will have listeners who are in organizations like this where, in some ways, that's a huge opportunity. Mm-hmm. In others, it still requires you to use that opportunity. Or also, I imagine, and I've never worked in an organization of this type, actually get airtime, get in the room, because yes, your audit colleague could sell you, but they need to know what you do, why they should, etc. I'd love to know how you've approached that, because again, I think it's a fascinating area for others who have that similar makeup and therefore challenge and opportunity.
There is an awful lot of internal networking that we do as a team. I'd like us to do even more. I'd like us to be more present in more of the offices, particularly outside of London, which is where the vast majority of our team sit. But I think the best way in which we've done that is try and show examples to different audiences of clients that they can resonate with. Either it's a client that's based in their office, so they know either the name or they know a colleague that's worked on the audit, the tax, the accounting, whatever it could be, and really take them through what we've done. Usually I then get inundated with emails and messages from people in other departments saying, can I come and work in management consulting with you guys? It sounds really fun. I say, that's just the way we spin it sometimes.
I was going to say a great recruitment angle as well.
Yeah, well, you say that, you create an enemy for the team that they work in where they're really well regarded. But that's a big thing for us to really say, we've just worked on this project with this client in your area or in your office that you know of as a result of an introduction from a colleague in your area, and this is the impact that we had. It doesn't always lead to additional opportunities, but it just helps increase the visibility of the team, and that was a big thing that we've tried to do. And there was a real risk that, and I think when I look back in the first 12-18 months I did this, spread myself too thin, and actually probably in hindsight picking some of the maybe core people, core services, core sectors, core offices, I don't know in hindsight, to focus on would have perhaps been a better idea than try and get across everybody in a very large organization. Now we've got more of a presence, we're more well known, we've delegated individuals to sort of look after certain areas of the business, certain offices, etc., to share those good news stories, because a lot of the work that we're doing in our team is different to other areas of the business. And as a team of 40 and 3,500, out of 3,500, we're not hugely well known, or as well known as I would like us to be in certain areas of the business. They won't know that this team exists. They won't know that a team that is solving some of the challenges and working on types of projects that we're working on with clients exist. And so we've got a big role to get out there and promote that as much as possible.
I love the case study example you explained, and it's one of those things that when you hear it sounds obvious, but I imagine so few do, of actually talking about clients people know, the benefits delivered. To your point, you're getting people comfortable that you can help their clients so they feel like they want to reach out to you. And how did you, just because you mentioned that spreading too thin, because to your point, in some ways you're 40 out of 3,000. So that means you've got 2,960 other people who could sell for you. In other ways, that's what 10 years of coffees, give or take. How did you hone that so you weren't spreading yourself or your team too thin, either in terms of networking or, I guess, the other side of too much demand is rarely a problem, but can be a risk. How did you balance that?
Well, I've never asked anybody to sell for us. That's the key. What I've always said is, I'm pretty confident your client has got a number of challenges. And even if you don't know what they are, let's go and find out what they are together. But if you do know what they are, I'd be pretty confident that at least one of those challenges is very, very similar, if not identical, to a problem that we've helped another client resolve. And therefore, there's an opportunity for us to go and educate that client that you've got and for you to increase your standing with them as a result of some of the work that we've done. Because you're right, there's people naturally feel very protective and feel very nervous of what could go wrong. We've really tried to accentuate that idea of, yes, but what could go right if you introduced us? You know, and we've got some brilliant examples. And that, as a result of that, we then try and use that person that introduced us as an advocate for us elsewhere, rather than it be Alan Frost going out saying how great his team are again, as always seems to be the case. You know, it's better if it maybe comes from somebody else than me, or even better from the client. So so that's how we've tried to do it. And we've got people who really understand what we do now and, you know, come to us on a regular basis saying, okay, I found out this client. It's about being curious, and that's who we've tried to link in with most of those people who are curious to understand outside of the individual project they're delivering for that client, be it in audit, tax, advisory, accounting, whatever. What else is on that client's mind? What are they thinking about? What are they struggling with? What's keeping them up at night? All these different things. Because even if we haven't necessarily got the solution in our toolkit, I do think we can help them gain clarity on the size of that problem and a way forward. You know, and there's no better way to, like I say, increase your own personal standing and the firm standing with the clients than just helping them guide them through that challenge.
Yeah, it comes back to what you were saying earlier, doesn't it, around being that trusted advisor. And if it's just, you know, a coffee or a short workshop or just something that clarifies and supports, it can only leave that good feeling. And it feels like that's part of your philosophy as well. Do good and good comes to you.
Yeah, we don't have the answers for everything. We really don't. But I do think we've got methodologies that help other people come to the answer. I sound like we're therapists now. We're not, but we do have structured approaches to get to the root cause of issues and hopefully take away some of that mind fog that people have around this just feels unachievable or unfixable or, you know, whatever it could be. And all I want to do really is ensure that as a firm we can be adding value to clients and really helping them in the things that are causing them concern and are holding back growth and value in their organization.
Alan, I'm very conscious we could talk for the rest of the day, and I know you don't have that time. I suspect there's a queue out the door for this media room, seeing how new it is and all of the kit. So I'm going to bring us towards the close, and I've got 2 questions that I ask all of my guests, and love to get your answers as well. So the first one is books, and it's quite simply, what is the book you've either gifted the most or has had the biggest impact on you, and why is that?
Well, there's probably 2. I don't know if that's allowed.
Sorry, books as well. Yeah, I should have put plural on as well.
Good. I like What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Very much recognizing that we have to be moving, you know, with the times and doing things differently and can't stand still for 1 minute, etc. Marshall Goldsmith, I think it is, isn't it, that wrote that, which is a great book. And the other one is Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And I'd be surprised if either of those 2 books actually are original or unique to your podcast. To be honest, they may well have been mentioned before, but again, that Will It Make the Boat Go Faster, and that idea of marginal gains, but really thinking about value add activities, you know, and focus, I think, which is, I also like the sporting analogy of it as well, obviously. But yeah, two brilliant books that I go back and do just flick to just a few pages every now and again. You don't need to read it cover to cover. You can just pick up things in individual chapters or random pages when you get time.
I think some great recommendations, and actually, you know, I appreciate you asking if anyone else had recommended them. And 150 episodes in, I have a reasonable encyclopedia, but not perfect. I don't think we've ever had What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So I have heard of it. now that you've recommended it, it will go right up the Kindle list to read. But it sounds like a similar theme with Will It Make the Boat Go Fast? That continuous improvement, that
definitely
how you continue to evolve and links to everything you've talked about. So no, just wanted to say it is a brand new, as far as I'm aware. Sorry if someone else has said it, but well done on that. And then the last question, and this could be as much a wrap up as something new, but you have 3 people in front of you. One is your graduates joining in September. One is a manager in your team. And the other one is someone who may be approaching partner. And the question is just, what one piece of advice would you give to each of them?
If you ever sit there and think, should I ring the client about this? You should have already done it. So what I mean by that is you cannot, to an extent, over communicate with our clients or with your clients and with your stakeholders. And when I look back at maybe my career, I wish maybe 10 years ago, I'd put a little bit more effort into developing deeper relationships with a smaller quantity of key stakeholders in certain clients than maybe trying to spread myself too thin. And there are still times now where I think, I really could have done a bit more building the relationship with that client, or I knew I should have called them last week. I didn't. And then when you see your phone ringing and it's that client ringing, you're thinking, they've rang me before I've rang them. We do it with friendships, don't we? We go, oh, I really should get back in touch with so-and-so. And then the next minute they reach out to you and you go, oh, I was just thinking of you. I was just going to reach out to you. Even if it's genuinely the case, it doesn't carry quite the same weight as maybe it does in your mind as in their mind. So the piece of advice I would give them is you can't over-communicate with clients.
I think a great place for us to end, Alan. I think that whole client-centric piece and I suspect team-centric piece as well really comes out there. This has been great. Thank you. Obviously, thank you for hosting me in this fantastic media room. I know we're going to have, it's going to be great for our listeners because of all this kit, not least because of all of the content you've shared as well. And the last question, if anyone has heard this and thinks, I'd love to find out more about you, love to find out more about Forvis Mazars, where would you point them to? Where can they get in touch?
Well, naturally, the forvismazars.co.uk website is a great place to start. Please feel free to follow or connect with me on LinkedIn, which would be great. I'm trying to become more active and share more opinions and thoughts on LinkedIn, but I'm always keen to meet and to read what other people are saying and what other people's ideas are. So, yeah, please do feel free to get in touch.
Amazing. Well, we'll put links to both of those in the show notes as well, Alan. And thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Been fascinated to hear the journey from audit to turning around a consulting firm to growing it to where it is today. And to your point, we'll do another one of these when you're 400 and you can share more of the secrets. But thank you and all the best for the rest of your week.
Thanks, Nick.
Cheers. Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the specialist digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Now, for long-time listeners, you will probably already know who we are. You may have even heard one of our ads on a previous episode of this podcast. But for those of you who don't, here is a short introduction. At Create Engage, we help you create an effective marketing strategy for your consultancy, a strategy that will resonate with your target clients. And then we support you by delivering the campaigns you need to turn that strategy into a reality, helping you to build your brand, raise your profile with your prospective clients, and ultimately generate return on investment from your marketing activity. Now, I could tell you about many of the great clients that we work with and the results we've delivered for them. But instead, I'm going to do something much more powerful and something that I would recommend you do for your own marketing. I'm going to let our clients do the talking for us. If you are currently thinking about marketing for your consultancy, you're going to want to listen to this.
Create Engage started the process for us. They managed it end to end. They came up with some really creative ideas and we were really happy with the work that they did, which meant that we could just focus on running the business. Not only did we start conversations with clients that we hadn't spoken to before, but also there was tangible return on investment by some work that we were given.
They've helped right from the initial shaping of the idea through to helping us work out what our end goal was. They've supported us with the visual identity and our positioning of the brand.
We've had an immediate expansion of our network and have initiated a raft of new conversations with owners, CEOs in target client organisations, and has led to us winning new projects already.
One of the greatest compliments, I guess, is that one of our competitors even said that they really like what we're doing with marketing and they wish they could be doing something as good.
So from our perspective, we couldn't recommend Create Engage any more than this.
I would certainly recommend Create Engage if you're a consulting firm. They really understand consultancies and the sort of challenges we face. And I don't think you're going to get much better marketing anywhere else.
So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend Create Engage. They did a really good job for us.
So if you're looking for an agency that can help you achieve the results that our clients just described, then head to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can find out more about how we support consulting firms like you. You can download our latest ebook and you can get in touch to talk about how we can help you take your consultancy to the next level through digital marketing. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.